Hello, I'm John Tierney, and welcome to Conversation with Your Congressman. Today we're fortunate to have with us a very important woman in the annals of what's going on with the financial industry and the Reform Acts here in Congress, Professor Elizabeth Warren from Harvard University, but now probably more popularly known around the nation as the chair of the Congressional Oversight Panel, chair of COP, or Chief COP, as we might want to say. That's charged with investigating all the United States Troubled Asset Relief Program. That was the multi-billion-dollar program that George W. Bush's Secretary of Treasury, Mr. Paulson, Henry Paulson, came to Congress in September of 2008 looking for money because of the trouble in the financial industry and, in his words, the possibility that not only would it implode, but the International Journal said that Professor Warren was one of the 50 most influential women attorneys in America. And when you pick up Time magazine next week, on the cover, you'll see her picture on that, and a story about her work here. So, Professor, tell us a little bit about how it was, first of all, that you came to be the chief cop.
I answered the phone. And that's really the truth. Like everyone else, I was following the crisis. I was following the whole business of, the Secretary Paulson coming to Congress and saying, give me $700 billion or the economy dies by Monday. And watched when Congress first said no and then finally said, well, we're going to put some restrictions in it, but we will do it. And so I was an innocent bystander like everyone else. And in November, I was having a party for my students. And the barbecue was being delivered. The golden retriever was running circles around my legs. And the phone rang, and this man said, "This is Harry Reid." I thought, what?
Do I know a Harry Reid, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he said, we have this oversight panel, and I want you to do this work. And I was really completely taken aback. And I did learn, though, this was my first lesson in dealing with members of Congress, and that is, I said, well, Senator, I'm honored. And he said, good, I'll take that for a yes. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. He was there.
He had it in mind that you were going to do it.
So he had it in mind that I was going to do it. And I did.
Yeah. So tell us, what does it entail? First of all, Congress didn't give $700 billion. I think that's what most people don't realize. One of the things that were done is we cut that way back and said, before you get any more of using that first tranche, you're going to have to come back and prove some things. So not all that money was given out, but with some restrictions put on its use. You had to get dividends and interest and other restrictions on that, and oversight being a major one. You've set up a website. The transparency, I think, you're going to be commended on for a long time. You set up a website. You issue periodic reports. So tell us a little bit about what it is you're doing and how it is you report, not just to Congress, but to the American people through that website.
Okay. So here's how the TARP got set up, basically.
That's a Troubled Asset Relief Program.
Troubled Asset Relief
The money
program.
that was given to those banks on Wall Street.
That's right.
When you wanted to slap them with the money, instead, unfortunately, they got it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the first $350 billion, roughly, the first $350 billion was Secretary Paulson committed it to the banks, and mostly to the big banks, way disproportionately to the very large financial institutions. And that went out the door before the oversight panel was ever even set up.
Right.
And you have to remember, he had started out, when he came to Congress, he said, we're going to deal with troubled assets. That's how it got its name. That was mortgages in trouble. He no more than got authorization for the money, then he turned around and said, well, no, actually what we're going to do is we're going to put the money straight into the banks. We're just going to give them the money. Lend it to them, no strings attached. And so that was already gone by the time we came in. So when we came in, we actually formed as a committee in November, on the day before Thanksgiving. And that's when we got our Republican counterparts, because we didn't have a quorum until then, couldn't do anything. And we issued our first report on December 10th. We set up our website immediately. As I said then, we didn't have a coffee maker, but we had a website. And what we did in that first report, and anyone can go look at it, it's cop.senate.gov. And what we did on that website is we said, this is how much we know. We'll show you what we're finding out. and this is going to be a place for our reports. There was also a video. I have to say, my students talked me into doing a 5-minute video to explain what was happening. And our first report was 10 questions to Henry Paulson. Came out on December 10th. And we said, Secretary Paulson, here are questions that the American people want to know. And it was about basically the operation of TARP. How it was that you said one thing and did another, where this money's going, what the restrictions are, how do we know it'll be used for lending, that sort of thing. And so the Secretary sent us back a response on New Year's Eve of that year. I think that response might be described as cut and pasted from some of the press releases and so on. And the panel did not think it was entirely responsive. So we did our second report on January 10th. And that second report laid down each question, made a little grid, and we put the Secretary's answer next to it. And then we put our comments.
And then he knew you weren't fooling around.
And that's when everything got serious. And so from that point forward, we started investigating their numbers. We stayed after the Secretary on the question of whether the American people were getting full value, or were we just giving this money away without getting something back in return. And that took us on into the spring. We then got a new Secretary of the Treasury, as you know, of course.
Sure.
President Obama became the president, and by that point, half the money's gone. And so the program really changed in a fundamental way. At that point, Secretary Geithner started looking at other aspects of economic recovery. So money starts going into the home mortgage foreclosure issues. It goes into trying to restart other parts of capital markets. It's smaller amounts of money spread a little more throughout the economy. And we kept issuing reports every 30 days. I confess, we probably have been a thorn in the side of Treasury under both administrations.
That's what we intended you to be. And that's, I think the Congress will take a little credit for that, for picking the right person and the right people and setting this up so that it wouldn't drop between, if we waited for congressional hearings on everything, there's usually a break between one hearing
Sure.
and the next hearing on. But you've got a continuum going on here, and it's been a constant oversight issue with reports coming back on that. So let me ask you the question we talked about briefly before we started here, and one that I think people are upset about this money going up. When you stop and you say to them, well, would you not have done the money? They all say, well, I guess I would have had to, which is pretty much what Congress was. If you get the Secretary telling you the whole financial world is going to implode, and not just the big banks that are in trouble that he's asking money to help are going to be done, but every small bank, every community, every business, all the way down the line. So people reluctantly say, all right, so we did this, and now we're overseeing it or whatever. Why did any of those people go to jail? Why did any of the people involved in the implosion of Wall Street and that whole system end up getting punished more than they seem to be punished, or held accountable in some respect?
Well, the first thing I want to say is it isn't over yet.
Good.
The statute of limitations has not run. And the Secretary, the SEC, the head of the SEC, has, as we know, in the Goldman Sachs case, they've now brought one indictment. The Attorney General of the State of New York, who has certain jurisdiction because of the location of Wall Street, has started criminal investigations. Now, is that enough? I'm not going to make that argument, but the point is there's now activity where there was none earlier on.
I take it we have a new SEC chairman.
That's right. We have new SEC chairman, and I think this is a new broom, a new sheriff who's come into town. And look, it takes time to get it together, and I want to say this. I applaud Chairman Shapiro. She wants to make sure she has her ducks.
Chairwoman of the SEC.
Chairwoman, that's right, the chair of the SEC.